what we want to think about with this is think of it as a way to build the immunity up of your plant. So if you think of our human health and stuff, we're more healthy if we're eating a diverse diet with a lot of different fruits and vegetables in it, and not so much processed food. And why we are is we're feeding our microbiome, our microbes. And so the same way with these plants. So think of it as when we're adding these compost extracts and microbes to the plant, that's what we're kind of thinking. This week we're going to be feeding the plant, but we're really actually feeding the microbes. So we got to think of it that way. So it's easiest to understand if we start understanding a little bit more about the microbes themselves and when we feed them, what is going on with the plant. For example, why we even want to get into this is lots of reasons. One of which is we're not living up to the genetic potential of our plants. So for example, they've studied corn probably more than any other plant in the United States. And so I think we average somewhere under 200 bushel, I think it's 170 or something, bushel in production ag out in farms as a nation. But when they do feeding that plant when it needs it and offering all of this biology to help build up its immune system so it can protect itself from diseases and pests and everything. And so when they do that, and they're applying these little tiny shots of extracts and micronutrients and stuff as the plant needs it. So we don't know exactly when it needs it, but they're finding out if they apply this stuff every week, then we catch the window in good shape. And so by doing that with corn, they've been able to get 600 bushel to the acre. That's a lot. I mean, holy moly, I'm like 400 more bushel than our best producers were able to get by just giving these extracts to the plant when it needs it. So for gardeners, we want to be thinking about when are we going to feed this stuff? So I do it every week if the plants are needing it, especially if I'm when I first started doing my beds or a new garden or a no-till, anything, I do that. I feed them once a week. And by doing that, then I can alleviate a lot of these problems that I would normally start getting built up. So if I do it every week, then that's what we kind of want to do. So what are we feeding when we give these, and we're putting compost extracts and these other amendments that I'm going to show you here today. And so when we are feeding the fungi like certain foods. And so why we want the fungi is mycorrhizal is a network under the ground, and it can supply all by itself 20% of the water needs of the plant. And that's just one of the benefits. There's massive amounts of benefits by having it. So we want to feed the fungi, and fungi like humics, seafood, kelp, and wood products, and leaves, even our paper products, cardboards, they just devour, right? That's like, yay, let's have a party if they've got those foods available to them. Protozoa, which think of them as a predator out there in this microbial world, and they're out there scarfing up bacteria as fast as they can. And when they digest that bacteria, now they've made all of the nutrients that was in that protozoa is now available to the plants. And so with the protozoa, we can get them to deliver 70% of all the nitrogen needs the plant needs. So just by having happy protozoa, then we're really doing some things, right? And so we want to be thinking, okay, how am I going to feed the protozoa? Well, obviously they eat bacteria, and here's just a few pictures of them. I think this is from Science Direct, and there's just incredible amounts of them, of all of this biology. We're just really just beginning to learn how much there is. It's just amazing. So here's a little video I'll show while we're talking. If you think of the bacteria, this is a compost sample underneath the microscope at, it's probably at 40x. And then even though, you know, that little, it's just one little drop of liquid compost that's been diluted down 20 times. And it's one little drop on this glass that's under the microscope. There's still tremendous amounts of depth in that one little drop. And so as you see, I'm refocusing and stuff, that's going through all these different layers of what's in that one little drop. But everybody that's jiggling in the background, they look like they're doing a little kind of jiggle dance, that is bacteria. And so the more bacteria, in which this is a great sample of the bacteria can look like, the more food we've got for the protozoa. This is a close-up of a protozoa, and its belly is packed full of bacteria. They just literally swim around the soil, which they're swimming on water filaments, but they're swimming around with their mouth open and just eating up bacteria like crazy. Just incredible. So what else does bacteria do in the soil? So they are actually creating these enzymes that break down all the chemical bonds for these different macronutrients that the plant needs. So these nutrients, this is where our soil sample comes in, and the soil sample says, we're fine. We've got plenty of these micronutrients. We don't have to worry about it. Well, that's true. They're there and they're present, but unless we've got enough biology to break those bonds and make it available to the plant, then the plant doesn't get it. And we've got to get the plant to get it, because that's what we need for that plant to be super healthy and for us to consume it and be super healthy. And so you can see just a few of these. These are major contributors that the plant needs and how many different bonds there is on those that needs to be broken. And so our bacteria is going to help do that. And what does bacteria eat? They love simple sugars, and it's amazing. If you have a farm field, say it's a huge farm field, right? You can literally go out there and put a pound of sugar to the acre and make major progress in getting that protozoa to deliver the nitrogen to your plants without doing anything else. I mean, that is about the cheapest fertilizer you can ever come across, right? So in our situation, though, I tend to use a little bit of molasses, and any spoiled milk products I will use for this reason, and you can do that year round. So microarthropods are another creature there that's in the soil, and they're a little bit higher order. They're actually a shredder, and they're shredding up all the wood material and the carbon products and stuff to make it available for the rest of the food web to start utilizing. So in this picture, there's two of them, one here and one there, which is quite incredible. And then this is a spore of fungi, to give you an idea of what this world looks like in the microscope. So in our mix that we're going to give our plants, I really don't worry about feeding the microarthropods, because my compost and mulch do that all by themselves. The fish we utilize, usually it's a fish hydrolysate if you're going to buy it, which that's what I usually do. But if I have a fisherman dropping me off fish byproducts, then I'll put them into my compost heaps or bury them into wood chip piles. They decompose really, really fast. And then I can take that material and then extract it into water. But for most gardeners, you're just going to buy some. And it's going to provide the nitrogen. Your seaweed and kelp are going to feed the fungal. And then your molasses or sugar will feed your bacteria. Worms are super, super important, right? And so I have a lot of worms in my soil and they're working for me. They're aerating the soil. They're helping make the soil softer and looser for the plants and plant roots. But they're also providing tremendous amounts of beneficial nematodes, bacteria, all kinds of stuff that come along with the worms and their castings. And I don't know if most of you know, but one worm can have, I think it's 96 baby worms every 6 months. So they can really reproduce really fast. And you can see this is a younger one here. This particular one probably is a red wiggler, so it may be mature size. Super important to add some worm castings. I add worm castings to every batch that I make. So here's a basic recipe that I use every week. And if I get a plant that's acting weird or whatever, I can even do it more often than that. But now if I don't need the nitrogen, then I might leave out the fish, right? But if you're just going to do this without paying that much attention to your plants, then this is a good basic recipe to follow. So about 4.5 gallons of water, and I put that bucket about half full, preferably rainwater. River water works great too. And then I add in these amendments, the fish, 1 tablespoon of fish, 1 tablespoon of kelp or seaweed, or if you have both on hand, a half a tablespoon of each, right? Because the more diversity, the better. 1 tablespoon of worm castings and a cup of really good compost. Now that compost is going to need to be strained. And so when I get done sharing here, I'll show you a strain bag. And then the sugars, you need very little, right? So they get super diluted down. I tell people to have a teaspoon because I know you're going to overdo that and put out more. But boy, we don't want hardly any, just a little bit, right? It goes a long ways in a garden. So that would be the basic recipe. Put that stuff in, maybe stir it around, and then add the other couple gallons to your bucket. Stir around more. So everything is pretty liquefied. It's going to look really brown water. We'll get into this more in another show on how to use that refractometer, but it's going to tell us if that plant is doing photosynthesis well or not. Right? The plants could be sitting there and they look fine, and you think, wow, they must really be doing photosynthesis. Right? That's what we're taught in school. They must just be doing it all the time. Well, that's not the case, but I'll do another show on that refractometer. But the important part of what's going on with the photosynthesis is when we apply this, the plant is going to be absorbing it in multiple ways, right? The microbes glue themselves to the surfaces, and your stoma is going to be taking it in from the bottom. I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the micronutrients, and from working with Nicole Masters and learning from lots of people online, that it seems like we're lacking boron in all of our soils. And so I think it's active boron that we're lacking. And so most people have been adding, that are getting a lot of other plants, is adding some boron. Now, it is a micronutrient, right? We need hardly any. Like, I think it's 4 teaspoons of the powder diluted in the water and then applied on 1,000 square feet. So I tend to not get crazy about doing the boron by itself. I like to put it in the compost, let those microbes process it, and then put it out which is what I prefer for all these micronutrients, just because I'm not a chemist and I'm not going to study that stuff to know exactly how much of each one I need to put out. So I tend to buy a packet of micronutrients that are already formulated for plants, and they're going to provide what I need. And I'll provide that information in the questions and answers. But your boron, think of it as like the pump for the plant. So almost like the heart, right? It's moving stuff up and down in the plant system. So when it's not happening, we're just not getting the photosynthesis done because nothing's moving. So if things aren't moving, then things aren't going well. Also regulates growth hormones in the plant. Calcium, super, super important, right? It's not very movable, right? Takes a long time to get a calcium product. When somebody says, oh, I'm adding eggshells, so my calcium must be fine. Well, it might be fine in a couple years, right? It's very slow to break down and to move. It's super important. And it helps hold together the cell walls, creates new tissues for root tips, young leaves, shoot tips, all kinds of stuff. Super, super important, and is used to activate the current enzymes, right? And it's a signaling system for the plant. When, as gardeners, a whole bunch of you won't be interested in what these micronutrients are doing or even what's going on. But when we're gardening, so most gardeners know when we see blossom end rot that, oh, we've got a calcium problem. But another simpler way to know, and this will happen before the fruit sets and before you have blossom end rot, is that your leaves at the bottom of your plant are really big, right? And then as you move up the plant, they tend to get smaller. So if a plant is doing that, it needs calcium. So the plant's leaves, those huge leaves that are at the bottom, should be the same size at the top. So super easy way for a gardener to know, oh, I need to get some more calcium out there because those leaves aren't as big. There's a basic recipe again. This is what the strain bags look like. This one on this side is a compost extracting bag, compost tea bag. And this is just a paint straining bag. So just in case you aren't going to go buy a bag on the internet, you can buy some paint straining bags right at your hardware. And then this is what the mixture looks like. It could be different colors of humics too, not necessarily always that dark, but. And we're going to put it out there weekly. So when to put it out, this is important, is to get the best use of it for your plant. And for one thing, I tell people, well, they're microscopic, right? They're sensitive to the sun. They're normally are where it's dark. And so why would we put it out during the day? We shouldn't be doing that. So think of when the birds are singing, that's a good time. So early in the morning or late evening is the best time to do it. So a lot of market gardeners that I know, they'll put it out every Wednesday night, just like a religion. That Wednesday night's compost extract night, and they go and put it out. In this picture, I'm putting out with a fogger that you hook the hose to, and I'm doing fruit trees. But you can use all kinds of things, from a pump sprayer to a backpack sprayer to little tiny hand sprayers. I'll show you one in a minute. But you might have to take out your filters because if you've got really good compost and really good worm castings, you're going to have nematodes in there and they'll plug up those. And that's also why we wouldn't use like a nylon bag. And so you need to have a bigger hole for them to go through than say a pantyhose or whatever. Here's the stomas. Want to make sure you do it when the plant has these open and not closed, because it's not going to, you'll still get some benefit, but you won't get as much benefit. We want them to be open. You can also add more anytime you start getting any negative signals going on, you know, so if you start seeing some aphids, then you could sure put out more than what we've been putting out. I'll stop sharing here. Has anybody got any questions?
Yes, I do. Hi, morning.
Good morning. How are you, Eileen?
Good, good. I'm at the dog park. So
Nice.
am I, with the fertilizer, it's okay to fertilize the branches, or am I just doing the dirt underneath?
Don't think of it as fertilizer, for one.
Okay,
And yes, you're going to do everything. You'll do the
okay.
plant. And if you got a way to do the side of the leaves, all the better. And so like I bought this little pump sprayer.
Mhm.
And so I'm planning on using that on plants where that you can get up underneath of them and spray it out.
Okay.
So it's not really a fertilizer. Just think we're feeding these microbes, because these microbes are going to deliver the nutrients to the plant.
Okay. Thank you.
You bet.
Patty, this is Sheila.
Hi, Sheila.
My son was asking me if you spray this stuff on, you know, pasture and cropland, what kind of nozzles? He's trying to build a unit and he's wondering what kind of nozzles to use.
They have them. I think, I hate to say, but maybe 20 micron.
Okay.
You have to ask and tell them that you want them pretty, and you usually have to take out your filters out of your sprayers, which sounds scary, right? But in order to get these guys to flow through the sprayer,
Yeah.
they've got to come out. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think he knew that part, that he needed to, you know, he's pretty mechanical, so
Nice.
he was just trying to figure out what that nozzle size needed to be so that he gets it right the first time, I guess.
Right. Yeah. And I think there's, I'm sure that you could search online to find that information too, to make sure. There's lots of farmers that have went that way. They're just doing incredible things. It's pretty exciting.
So I have a question that's sort of not related to what you're talking about today, but in a way it is, because I'm just starting this with my garden. I was going to put some kind of manure on it here, like within the next few days, and then I'm going to put straw over that and plant. But I want to know if I should work that manure in just a little bit before I straw, or if it's okay just to leave it.
So what is existing on the garden right now? Is it
Just-
soil or
Just
is
soil.
it compost?
It's just soil that I've been planting in for years, and every 3 or 4 years I just add manure to it. And it hasn't had any for probably 3 or 4 years.
And the plants have enough nitrogen last year?
They were sketchy. So, like I say, I'm just kind of starting all this and understanding what I should be doing here.
Right.
So,
Well, ideally, you're going to put that manure or compost, whatever it is, on in the fall, right? So that gives the microbe winter to decompose it and get the nutrients that are in there available for the plant to be able to use. So that's why, and that's also a standard for, like, for us to serve the food at the school. We have to put any animal manure we put on has to go on in the fall and not harvest for 6 months.
okay.
So just to give you an idea of what the standards are out there. And what you don't want to do is get so much nitrogen out there that the plants can't handle it. Like I
Right.
was with a friend yesterday in her greenhouse, and she had decomposed cow manure, you know, it was 5, 6 years old, 7 years old, but there was still some fresh manure in there. And she was having trouble with it burning her plants. And
Yeah,
so,
no, I guess that's been my concern, and I wasn't particularly wanting to work up this soil this year, because as in rototilling it, because right now it's really nice.
Everybody else that knows me knows I'm going to say, don't till it.
Right.
Us.
Right. But so I'm moving from that into this other. So I'm in that transition period and I'm wanting,
Yep. So what I would do is take some of the fresh, not fresh, but your aged manure and add it to where you're going to put a potato or a tomato or whatever it is, and just put it in that spot and then mulch everything.
Okay.
Right. Don't add a massive amount to it in the spring. In the fall, sure. You can add it in fall and then cover it up with mulch. That'd be great. And then they're going to break down all the stuff, right? Because they got to break all those bonds of all those micronutrients to give you just a rough idea of what's going on. That all that's got to take place. So you want them to do that. And they do their best work in the winter, right? It's just nature's way.
Yes. And it's getting my husband to get it on the garden is the problem.
Yes. No, I get you. I got you. Yeah.
So you know how that is on a ranch. It's like my garden takes the last on the leg of the ladder, so.
Right. Oh yeah, yeah.
But so I plan on, because I am growing red wigglers and making vermicast. And so I plan to have some of that on hand here fairly shortly. So I will have that to work with too.
You just follow this recipe, super easy, right? You
Right.
do that every week. You probably wouldn't have to add you wouldn't have to add a massive amount of compost. A lot of guys that market gardeners are only adding an inch of it in the fall.
Okay.
Inch of compost to the top of the soil.
All right.
They water, right? Every time they water, they're releasing more of that
Nutrient
microbes and the nutrients down into the soil.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. Any other questions? Wow, you guys are easy this week.
I have one.
Okay.
Okay. Patty, mulch. When you say mulch, there's so many different kinds of mulches that you could use, correct?
Yes, hundreds.
So what are the best kind of mulches to use for your garden?
If you could get old chopped up alfalfa hay that doesn't have seeds in it,
Okay.
ideal. Very, very few can do that. Right. I use alfalfa hay. I didn't shake it out at all. I was done gardening, and so I just took it, and that kept all those microbes plumb happy. Now I moved that away. Yeah, I can literally just sink my hand into the ground right now, because those microbes kept it nice and soft and opened up. Yeah, and Charlie says that, and I get all my worm castings from Steve too, if I need to get any larger scale. And Steve Charter down at Billings, he's just north of Billings. He's got field size totes of worm castings, and he'll let people get it by the 5-gallon bucket too. He would also probably be a good reference for that nozzle size.
I got a question, Patty.
Okay, Charlie.
So on my farm, we're dry farming, so it's
Yep.
typically pretty moist May, June timeframe, but come July, August, plants still have the subsoil moisture, so they're still growing just fine, but there's not active rain moistening the top couple inches of soil.
Mhm.
So I guess my question is, in a home garden scenario where you're watering on a weekly basis or a regular basis anyways, you're keeping that top layer of soil moist, and so the food that you're applying through this compost tea is actively available and being used throughout that whole season. But for me, where my top layer of soil is now dry, do I want to be really focusing on being as good as I can on it during May and June when it's moist, and then not worrying so much as the soil dries out? Or do I just want to be focusing on applying it to the plant itself rather than the soil.
Right, because think of these microbes gluing themselves to the leaves. And if there's massive amounts of microbes glued to the leaf, and then a fungal spore comes flying by that is a bad fungal that you don't want in your plants, it doesn't have any place to land and attach because of all these other microbes that are already in place. And so that's what I would do, is just be spraying the plant for the most part
Okay.
in your dry situation. You know, when you have moisture available, sure, you put it everywhere. But
All right. Sounds good.
yeah, it'll take us a long ways dealing with not having disease problems, and eventually we'll get the plant and the soils build up enough that the plant's doing enough photosynthesis and has enough microbes working with it that it doesn't have any pest either. So it takes both the micronutrients getting released to the plant and the microbes to get to that level where that we don't have any pest and any diseases, but we got to get to that point. So the more the better with this type of application. I mean, you can't go wrong. I mean, I've never seen anybody go wrong. I guess if you was putting fish on every single day, I wouldn't recommend that, but other stuff you probably could get along with. As far as the milk, though, think that it needs to be highly diluted, right? Don't go pour a gallon of milk just straight out on the ground. It needs to be diluted down. They say they like a teaspoon or tablespoon to the 5-gallon bucket, to give you an idea, and when they're spraying it out. And so like by spraying milk, a watered down milk product, you can do away with any powdery mildew. But here's the compost tea bag, and you can see I don't know if you can see that. That's how big the holes are. And so in your sprayers or anything, that's got to be that big in order to let those nematodes go through it and get out into the liquid to be floating around to be able to use them. So, and then, you know, when I was talking about the protozoa and them digesting that bacteria, the nematodes are the same way, but nematodes are a lot bigger, right? And so they actually are not only digesting it and making it available to the plant, I guess they can eat so much that they puke it back out, and then it's plant available too. So it's pretty amazing what they can do. So we kind of want lots of microbes.
Patty, I've got another question.
Okay, Charlie.
We've talked mostly about applying the biological inoculant or the compost tea to a living plant. I was curious about as a seed treat before planting. Can you talk about, do you use that same mixture recipe that you listed and just kind of spray that to your plant or to
Compost or the vermicast and compost extract. And if you're going to buy microbial, which usually comes in a powder if you're buying it, that all goes in the seed treat. And the root dip, right? When we transplant something, like if I was to buy a tree, I would never, ever consider planting that tree without dipping the root ball in this mixture. You know, without the sugars. You don't really want sugars in at that point, but you just want it to go into your compost extracts and your microbial product that's available at a really good nurseries would have it, and it's available online. I've been buying mine from John Kemp. It's called BioCoat Gold, but I'm not here to really promote any one product, but I use his micronutrients and his microbial.
I'm about to plant a bunch of trees, and because I'm getting my St. Lawrence nursery order
Good.
this next week.
So when those bare roots come in and you're getting ready to plant, I just mix up a bucket of this stuff and just
A
put
bucket of this stuff, meaning the compost extract, or this other stuff that you do?
extract, and then the microphysal if you can find some.
So I got a big bale, I guess, or they had the microphysal seed starting mix.
You probably spraying those microbes off. You're not necessarily getting the whole fungi. You're getting, so you can sure the microarthropod is just a round spore. There's just hundreds of different ones, right? And so you're just getting those spores. And then when those spores get in the soil and the conditions are right, you really get into this and stuff, you're going to be planting plants that do colonize with microphysal alongside the ones that don't. So you're constantly keeping them alive in your system and your soil. So that, say I plant kale, I plant a lot of kale because I love kale. So, but in that kale bed, I'm going to plant some onions, some carrots. They're both very microphysal in there with them to just feed the fungi and keep that fungi alive and working. So it takes from the time the microphysal gets wiped out, which takes a lot to get it wiped out, but like if you, in the big floods that they had in the corn country and stuff, they wiped it all the way out. It took 8 weeks for it to come back, and so it got wiped out from setting in submerged water. So there was no air left in the soil. So they're alive and they all need to have water and air. So, but in our garden situation, we don't have to worry about wiping them out, but we want to keep them active and working. So that's why I commingle some of these plants. I use Sweet Alyssum the same way. I'm having it running in all kinds of beds. I don't know as it's going to be helping the fungi as much, but it's definitely helping my beneficial insects.
So you would dip the root ball as you're planting a tree or a bush or whatever in that mix, and then would you add some of the microphysal mix too, or just like compost?
Yeah, like at Tiger's over there in Great Falls.
Tilleros?
Yeah, Tilleros. If you buy a treat from them, they're going to try to sell you a packet of microphysal, right, that you would be adding to the planting hole.
Okay.
Did you get some compost extracts that?
Well, I got some compost from them that I've been using for compost extract, and I still have to look into the source that you told me about from the Great Falls. You said that they had some at the dump that they were making, so I need to look into that still, but I need to go in this week and get more compost, either from Tilleros or from the dump, and some straw. I want to get some straw as well.
A lot of the compost that they sell, like at the big box stores, that's all been sterilized. And so you're like, wow, that is really counterproductive, right? Because I thought I bought a live, fightable product, but they legally have to sterilize it. So you vote for some in that case.
I've been using the stuff that I get from Tilleros, and it's just in a bucket. And once when I was there, their pile was steaming.
Yeah.
So
It's
it's pretty good compost. And I got compost bins made. So hopefully I can get that going on my own.
Yeah, because we can make way better than we can buy.
Yeah.
So next week I will not be on Grow Live. Hopefully Jackie can be. I am going to be down at Turner doing a workshop on composting, and not Turner, sorry, Jordan, Montana. So that's next Saturday. If anybody wants to join us, we're going to make a bio-stew and start a thermal compost pile. And then I also, on the 20th in the evening, I'm doing a workshop with one of the ag peoples. We're doing it on growing food and not grass. And so we'll be teaching people more how to do that if anybody wants to join us. That one will be on Zoom. But you can find those links on my Facebook site. So is there any other questions?
Can I put a plug in for Nicole Masters coming to Malta?
Yes. Definitely.
So in July, Charlie, you might be interested in this. I don't know where you live, or maybe even Lori. Nicole Masters is going to be in Malta July. I don't know exactly the date yet. I'd have to go look. I should know it. But if you go to ranchstewards.org, we will have a link up there to register for that workshop. It'll be a hands-on, out in the field type thing. So I belong to that organization, and I know Patty's done stuff with us too. So
Yeah,
you
definitely.
can spread the word because it's in our area. So that's a great thing.
Do you know how many people they're going to let in, Sheila?
I don't know yet what that is. So they haven't put anything up yet. I'm off of the board now, so I'm not part of the decision-making processes anymore. So I think that's going to be up fairly soon here, though. I think they're trying to figure out what all to do with the COVID stuff's getting lifted here, obviously.
I've had a lot of people do lots of it where we do a biologic test when we go in to do our control on the soil so that we know where we're starting from. And then we're talking about on scale. And, most gardeners aren't wanting to get too giddy about paying for $120 biologic tests. But on bigger farmers, we do. We do that first initial test so that we'll get them, really give them some education is what it really does. Because every one of them I've seen, they all need so much work that it isn't funny. So you could probably skip the test if you want to save some money and just go right to work with this stuff, because I haven't seen any that are good enough to not need it. And even if you do, like in my situation, I'm still not quite biologically really good, because there's so many different qualities of compost that's why I say we can make way better than what we can buy, because we know, like, I don't have a minimum of 40 different products go in my compost, right? So the more diversity that goes in that compost, the more diversity of soil life that comes out. And so when you go buy a compost that's been made with just wood chips and leaves, for example, because they got so much of them in these big cities and grass clippings, that's not the compost I choose to use for these extracts is my very best every single time. Every year it gets better because I'm adding life from last year's compost to this year's compost and just keep adding more and more. And this year I'm going to be adding the micronutrients to my compost. So then those microbes are able to break that down, and then there'll be more plant available when I put that out next fall. So like I'm going to be adding like a couple teaspoons of boron to a whole compost heap, right, to get boron into the pile. I'm going to be adding sulfur. I'll be adding rock chips that I got from the quarry, right? So those sort of micronutrients go in the compost, then the microbes break it all down, get it plant available. Then I don't have to be a chemist and figure it all out, right?
And add liquid gypsum. So the gypsum that I've found at the hardware store is granules.
Right.
So, I mean, is it just going to be before? I think you said wait a week before doing anything else with it. Then we were talking about kind of combating the weeds, and would it? This weekend I have a pile of wood chips that I need to unload, and
Oh, you did send me a short video and I watched that. That was pretty interesting. I don't know if there was a longer one that had more detail about it, but kind of the brief one where the guy saw him kind of initiating in the spring, thought he was going to have to manage it, but throughout the season they didn't.
And thistle and farms fields. I call it a fall primer. And so it's more or less what we're talking about here, plus the microwave. And then we call winter, and so, a lot of these plants, especially our perennial bindweed and Canadian thistle, I think they're trying to do that job. They definitely are trying to get fungi in the system. I know that. And so if we can do the job for underneath her, 20 foot deep. All right. I think we better wrap her up there, kids.
I have one more question, Patty, real quick.
All right.
Sorry. I'm trying to get some white clover, Dutch clover started in my lawn areas. And my first try wasn't very successful, I don't think. I got some inoculant. I've got the seed. Any tips on getting that stuff growing now? It might have just been too cold when I put it down first, so.
Mine's getting a couple leaves on it now, and it was planted last year. To give you an idea that it likes this cold weather, but they were already established, right?
Right.
So just starting to get them established, I'd probably wait until it got a little bit warmer, and then go ahead and put the inoculant powder on the seed itself, shake that into the bag, and then spread the seed, and then use this extract that I just explained to you. You put that on top.
Okay.
And then keep going with it weekly after that.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, white Dutch clover is exciting. It's a lot more market gardeners are finally going that way, and I'm like, finally.
Well, I need a lawn area for the dog, but I thought I would just mix it in and build up the soil while I'm growing grass.
Yeah, and the bees love it too. So let's see, can we share a video on the weeds Charlie was talking about? Yeah, Sheila, I'll put that on the Facebook site. I think I have it on my site. I've got so many sites that isn't funny, but I think it's on the Patti Armbrister Facebook one. But I'll make sure I'll put it up there. And it's dealing with getting rid of the bindweed or the Canadian thistle. But when I did some research on those two plants, I think they're both trying to do the same thing. When you steep them in water for 72 hours, it's just full of fungal spores, just massive amounts of fungal spores. And I'm like, you can see them growing in the microscope. Like, these plants are trying to get fungi back in the system that we don't have. We're severely lacking. So if you got compost, compacted soils, you need to get fungi in there. And I haven't seen any soil tests showing that you had too much fungi yet. Now, in my growing situation, I know that I'm over the tipping point because I don't have an annual weed grow in my environment. I'll have a tree come up in my environment. So I already know that I'm at too high a fungal to bacteria ratio, and I need to back that down. And so I'm doing that by feeding more bacteria and putting on more bacterial foods than I am fungi food. But the majority of gardeners aren't anywhere near that. And so you can tell by what plant is growing as to what's going on with that. Carbon nitrogen ratio and the fungal ratio both. All right, well, I hope we've helped you some this week. And for sure, just keep putting this stuff on. You can't go wrong. If you start seeing a few pests show up, put on more of it.
Thank you, Patty.
You're welcome. You guys have a great weekend. Enjoy the weather. Looks gorgeous out there.